Welcome to Ask the Tech Coach, brought to you by the TeacherCast Educational Network. If you are in charge of professional development and looking to build an innovative digital learning experience, this is the podcast for you. Join us each week as we uncover strategies that tech coaches are using to drive their digital transformations one classroom at a time. And now for your host, with over 2 decades of experience working with tech coaches and ed tech companies from all around the world, Jeff Bradbury.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the TeacherCast Educational Network. My name is Jeff Bradbury. Thank you so much for joining us today and making TeacherCast your home for professional development. This is Ask the Tech Coach podcast. Welcome to 2021. It is a new year, and I am so excited to be talking to you guys today. Thank you once again for making TeacherCast a part of your professional learning platforms. I have a fantastic guest today talking all about curriculum and how we as tech coaches can be supporting that curriculum. And if you have any thoughts on this topic, we would love to have you guys reach out. You can, of course, find us on Twitter over at Ask the Tech Coach. And of course, check out all of the new archives over on AskTheTechCoach.com. We got some great things there, and we've got some great adventures coming up on our TeacherCast Tech Coaches Network. So I hope you guys have a chance to check out all the action over at AskTheTechCoach.com. We would love to have you. My guest today is the author of an amazing book all about curriculum, and I want to welcome onto the program Miss Kat Howard. Kat, how are you today? Welcome to Ask the Tech Coach.
I'm good, thank you, Jeff. How are you?
I am such good today. We had a great holiday. How was your holiday?
Fantastic, actually. Yeah, really full on with, we have 3 boys, so it's always mayhem, but really good. Yeah, good and rested.
And tell everybody where you're from today.
So I am an assistant principal in an all-through school. So that's from 4 all the way through to 18, so 6th form included, in Northamptonshire, so an inner city school.
How many students are you responsible for?
So we're at 2,000 students at the school, quite a diverse demographic as well, quite a high disadvantage, so a real mixture in there. Yeah, it's quite a challenge, but a good challenge.
You know, a lot of the coaches that listen to this show are in that same position. They're running in districts. Maybe they're the only coach in an entire district. Maybe they're responsible for that K-8 or that 9-12 kind of area. Talk to us a little bit about your school system. What are some of the challenges that you guys are facing? Feel free to talk COVID if you want, but I mean, overall in general, what does the school systems look like in the UK these days?
I think it's making sure, we very much breathe a knowledge-rich curriculum, and it's about making sure that everybody is entitled to, and we have a duty of care to make sure that everyone has access to that high challenge curriculum, irrespective of, socioeconomic background or anything like that. When it comes to tech barriers, particularly at the moment, I'm going to try not too much to touch on the C word, but I think that it's our kind of our duty of care to make sure that everybody has access to amazing curriculum content so that they're able to engage with the wider world. And that's kind of where we place ourselves.
Now, in America here, we have tech coaches, digital learning coaches, instructional, all kinds of different ways of saying the same, professional development position. Do you have such a position over in the UK? And if so, what are they generally called?
Yeah, so we have an extended senior leadership team, quite a large senior leadership team, and our responsibilities and roles within that senior leadership team are to oversee particular aspects as such. So my responsibility within school is to oversee staff professional development. I oversee our coaching team within the school. So every member of staff is coached as part of their professional development. We see it as absolutely integral to developing our teachers.
That's awesome. In my district, we have a very large school district, 24 buildings, K-12. We are actually this year starting off a brand new chapter. We're creating a digital learning department. We have about 8 people that we're starting as full-time, full-employed tech coaches. What does that look like for you guys? I mean, how many staff members are your coaches working with? You said you have 2,000 students. How does that department look for you?
So we probably have about 50 coaches who coach staff within. What we did is we trained a large amount of our staff body so that they're able to work with probably 4 to 5 maximum. I wanted to make sure that our coaches had a really small team of people to develop, almost as an old-fashioned line management process, but that there was a real focus so that they know exactly what, the needs of those particular staff, where they're currently at the moment. And we placed a great deal of ownership onto the member of staff for their own professional development. So that member of staff will come to their coach, but as I say, the onus is on them to create their self-made goals at the beginning of the academic year, work out, where they are professionally, where they want to see themselves, what they want to work on. And there's a real kind of focus on pedagogy, or developing themselves as a subject expert when it comes to setting those goals themselves. And then we take it from there, really. So those coaches can meet with their coachees if they want to every other week. It's a really informal process, but we do safeguard, so we protect time at 3 key points over the course of the academic year for those coaches to meet with coachees and really just to have that space and time to discuss their professional development, because it's absolutely vital to developing teachers.
I'm stuck on the fact that you just said one coach for every four staff members. That's an amazing ratio right there. That is absolutely mind blowing, that ratio there. I mean, how? First of all, let's talk a little bit about what the district is. If I was to ask, are you Microsoft based, Google based? What's the backbone? What's your LMS? Like, how does all that work?
Yeah, so we've literally just this year, because of obviously the thing that we're not talking about, moved over to using Microsoft Teams as a core part of engaging with students, but also as a way of ensuring that teachers have access to professional development as well, particularly while we were working from home for such an extended period of time. It really opened up so many opportunities for staff to engage with CPD remotely on a flexible basis around children. And I think that was really, really important to maintain that sense of community, I think, as a school. CPD was the welcome distraction, I think, for what was a really, really challenging time, as I think we can all appreciate. I think it was also a really nice way to continue to build those communities, that sense of collaboration for some teachers was quite an isolating period, I think. So Microsoft Teams did wonders for us. And we've actually kind of continued that now that we've gone back into schools. So we have a Microsoft Team platform. All of our particular faculties, our different subject teams, have a specific Teams group. But we also have a SharePoint as the school as a whole, where we share all of our professional development. So on there, we can signpost staff. If a coach is having a meeting with one of the people that they're coaching, they can signpost them to that platform. And there is a series of pre-recorded, really short, manageable sessions, CPD sessions, that staff can access and revisit, which I think has really kind of moved professional development on, not just in our school, but I think as a profession, really.
That sounds very similar to my school district. We started Teams this year. We're looking to make the jump with students next year, but this year we're both basically doing it with the adults. One of my roles is to be building our SharePoint intranet, putting together this, leading the digital learning. Your story sounds just a few months ahead of where we're going. So this is awesome. And I'm glad that you're mentioning all of this stuff. I mean, when you're looking at this as far as coaches, and I'm sorry, I'm still stuck on one coach for 4 people. But
I think we trained teachers as coaches, so I think that's what helps the resource there. Because in order to develop as a teacher, I think understanding the process of coaching and how coaching works, and moving up and down that spectrum as a coach between really providing guidance and signposting and quite directive, and knowing when to lean back a little bit and let the individual take ownership of their professional development, moving up and down that spectrum is such a vital part of understanding how to develop teachers. That's why we wanted our teachers to understand the process of coaching, and it has done amazing things, because then you're having all of those conversations, I think, professional conversations in schools that aren't about data or accountability or grades. They're just talking about great teaching. And there's been so much feedback from coaches about, because they're teachers, about how much they've gained for their own practice as a result of those conversations. So I think the kind of scope, the impact of it is, as a result of having teachers as coaches, has been probably, vaster than maybe we even realize at this point.
The joke that we say here on the show is if you have 10 tech coaches in the room, you have about 24 different job descriptions. What do you see as the primary function of a coach? It's to support the fill in the blank.
I'm not even sure I'm okay with the support. It's to support the development, the ongoing, the continual development of the profession as a whole, and in whatever capacity that might take. And it's coming back to that spectrum of when you're having that conversation with a person as a coach in a coaching capacity, knowing when to go. Okay, what do you think that might need to look like? What do you think, this obstacle that you're presenting to me? What are the current barriers? What's the reality? What does that look like to be 10 out of 10 on your questioning or your subject knowledge? How do you enable that you're able to make that journey in order to get to that? And as a coach, it's knowing when to perhaps, as I say, be more directive and provide some of the answers, and knowing when to step back. And that's a really powerful role to bring teachers on, I think, at any level of their career. And it helps us as well to come back to those conversations about the fact that we are a graduate profession, but we're never done. Like, we're never finished. There's always something we can continually improve at. And coaching, it helps us provide that narrative, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to, even as people are listening to this show today, this, is launching on Monday, January the 4th, I believe this is. I'm starting my meetings today with our new digital learning team to have these conversations of what does coaching look like? How do you get in? How do you introduce? Our coaches are going to be split among 3 different buildings and trying to manage, 5 days, 3 buildings, subject areas, all of that stuff. And I'm looking forward to it. Obviously, as we go in through teams, that is going to be the great equalizer, trying to bring things in. I know we're a little off the topic here that we wanted to discuss, but I'm just fascinated here. How has your adoption of Teams gone so far? I mean, it's one thing to say Teams is now our meeting location, but to actually get in and use it and those 201, 301, 501 level uses of Teams, I'm assuming you have a longer roadmap. It didn't just turn the light bulb on and things worked.
Oh, you know what? So I was responsible for setting up the platforms within Teams and kind of introducing staff to it, and also, creating a policy as such, or a process so that students could access it as well. And it was probably the biggest learning curve for me this year, because a great deal of the content out there from Microsoft Teams is all about how to build your business. So, exactly. and finding, how to do things. It's such a new skill set, a new domain, but it's been really fun. And like you said, it's about kind of that, once you've got that initial setup, it's about maintaining the engagement, the interaction from teachers with it, because you can't just say, okay, here's loads of stuff, use loads of stuff. And so, so what we had to do is add value to it, essentially.
It's funny. I'm right here just nodding I know this is an audio show, but I'm just nodding my head going, yes, that's where we are. These are the discussions that we're having. When we're looking at things here and we're looking at the coaching position, I want to talk a little bit about the importance of having these coaches know what their focus is. I know we're focusing on humans. I know we're focusing on making sure that things are happening in the school district, but really we're here to help make sure our teachers are comfortable in their classrooms, supporting their curriculum. Now, you recently released an amazing book called Symbiosis. I believe that's how you pronounce it.
Symbiosis, yeah.
Symbiosis, okay. Talk to us a little bit about the book. Where can we find it and what's in it?
So it's available via the John Catt website, who are my publisher. It's also available via Amazon as well. We were incredible enough it's co-authored with a dear kind of friend of mine, Claire Hill, who is a trust lead across a series of schools. And really the underpinning messages behind Symbiosis was the fact that sometimes curriculum is presented as somewhat of a holy grail that only so many people within a school with so many years experience can be a part of and be involved in curriculum development. And we kind of wanted to flip the narrative on that and actually say curriculum is almost the cornerstone of everything in schools. Curriculum is about teacher wellbeing and that sense of purpose and being really fired up into, coming coming into work every day. I think sometimes we underestimate what a decent curriculum can do for teacher wellbeing and feeling that sense of purpose. But also that all teachers are curriculum designers, that it's not just one or two individuals sitting in a room, putting a curriculum plan together for students and then going, here you are, here's what you're teaching this week. Actually, again, coming back to this graduate profession, we have so much resource in our staff teams within, within our staff body and within the teaching profession as a whole, that actually using that doesn't just develop an improved curriculum, but it does fantastic things for a sense of collaboration, for improving communication and the conversations we're having in school, and that sense of community of continuing on this narrative of continually getting better. And that's what we wanted to try and impact. So to provide the tools, the research-informed tools to, okay, how do you set about the task of designing an effective curriculum, but also how do you use the curriculum to develop your teams professionally, bring everybody along in the journey? How can we all feel really engaged with what essentially is the main part of our job as teachers?
So you mentioned two things. A teacher creates the curriculum and then uses the curriculum. Does the coach fit into both of those things?
Definitely. And I think also coaches play an integral part to when it comes to using the curriculum to develop professionally and develop our teachers. I think that often you can see in schools when a curriculum has been put together, we see it as done and dusted, and that, there's your subject curriculum and we don't need to touch it for another 5 years, which is completely untrue. And so, okay, if we're going to move away from that and we're going to see it as something we need to continually review and unpick and improve, we need coaches in order to be able to help us understand how to have those conversations. There's so little training, I think, particularly in the earlier parts of teachers' careers, around how to work professionally with other human beings. We don't get told about that. We get told about how to teach, and we get told a little bit about how to work with children. But actually, some of the most important work that happens in our school is down to the conversations that we're having with adults, and actually quite tricky conversations where you don't always agree, and how to work through them. And I think coaches can provide a really powerful, important narrative on what that might need to look like for teachers, so that they are able to carry out the work of the curriculum, I think.
How do you train your trainers? One of the topics that we talk a lot here is, it's okay to be a coach and you're supposed to be the leader of the group, but how do you go about leading your leaders or training your trainers?
Yeah, but I think there's almost a dual strain to this. I think there's the formality, so the formal training that happens. We have a professional coach who comes in and trains staff once a year, and that will be done on a refresher basis over the course of the year. Even when we go back into schools next week, we're having a refresher session, just a 30-minute session on, how do we form goals? What should they look like, maybe? What does success look like? So we're continually doing that. But it's also modeling those conversations all the time, every single day, in every single exchange that we have, is how are those conversations? The majority of the conversations that we have, coaching conversations, how are we using those as opportunities to bring people along? And when it's operational, when it's, what time does lunch need to be? What time do we need to escort children out of the building? Yes, that's not a coaching conversation. We're just giving information over. But actually, when we're talking about things like the curriculum, they should be coaching conversations. It shouldn't just be handing over the answers to people, because actually that's long-term work. That's not something that needs an answer all of the time. And actually what you do find when you make curriculum decisions like that, where they're very reactive and directive and responsive, we're disempowering teachers, because they're not necessarily ever going to develop as individuals if we're just giving them the answers all the time, which coaches are well aware of. But we're also just making snap judgments that are really responsive, and actually that normally dilutes the curriculum further down the line. So actually, when we're having those conversations that have long-term impact, we're modelling what good conversations look like, and that has a massive impact. And I think that's where kind of our senior leadership team really excel in, and the head at my school, Sam Strickland, we really excel at this, because by modeling the way those conversations should look all the way down, that filters, that has such a ripple effect throughout school as a whole.
One of the things that we talk about, or I'm looking forward to talking about, is the fact that this team that we're putting together in our school is it has the potential of being a complete team. We've got people who are interested in leadership, people who have a background in younger, people who have a background in arts or STEM. And, the goal for us to put these people together was really to build a team where we can complement each other. That being said, there's only one person that's in the classroom with that other teacher. How do you go through and, what's your philosophy on cross, what's the right word here? Like cross coaching, or making sure that if a math-based person is working with a teacher that might not be doing math, how do we find confidence to work with these other teachers who we might not have? Do you know what I'm saying here? Because I'm not saying
domain isn't there.
This is the problem, right? Like, it's not even have these conversations. But please take the question out of my mouth.
So if I'm working, for example, I line manage PE and I'm an English specialist, so I'm sat there with absolutely zero knowledge of PE. One, I have a responsibility as that person's coach in PE to upskill myself on some basic knowledge around physical education and what that looks like in the classroom. But I'm also really relying on that person being able to give me information that I need about their curriculum in order to understand it better. Now, if I'm a coach, the best thing I can do for myself there is to make sure I'm asking the right questions. So actually, have I made sure that I understand different knowledge structures and how knowledge is structured within the physical education curriculum? All of this is kind of detailed in the book a little bit. Do I have an understanding of how PE should be sequenced so that one sport comes after the other, or how are we creating a sense of progression for students? And have I asked that question to my PE person that I'm coaching? And so I think it's not necessarily about being an expert of, maths if you're coaching a maths expert, but it's about having a basic understanding of maths, in that it's a hierarchical subject, for example. And it's making sure that we ask the right questions, because if you're asking questions of somebody's curriculum, it's quite exposing, and it will enable them to go, actually, I hadn't thought about that aspect of my curriculum design. I hadn't thought about sequence. I just put everything that I wanted to teach, but I hadn't necessarily thought about the order. And so as a coach, asking those questions is actually quite powerful in raising not necessarily problems, but questions or that haven't been thought about yet, and I think that's the best thing that we can do as coaches, is make sure that we're asking really powerful questions, really kind of, high value questions to get people thinking about maybe the right things that they should be thinking about when it comes to their curriculum design.
It's an interesting conversation. It's one that we talk about here every now and then on the podcast. We talk about that imposter syndrome of you walking into somebody and you are the coach, that's your title, but that person might have 15 years teaching on you, or that person might be the subject area. And, one of the other things that we mentioned is, when you're in an elementary room, you're talking to one teacher, but that one teacher is part of maybe many fourth grade teachers. They're kind of going with the wave. Whereas in a high school, you are the AP social studies teacher. There's nobody else. You are the expert. It's a little nerve-wracking sometimes, especially for new coaches who might be in their later 20s, plucked out of the classroom for their technical skills, and they're walking into these rooms for their first time, trying to prove themselves, not only to themselves, but to others in the district. What's your advice when you're working with young coaches?
I think vulnerability is such an underestimated tool in our profession, and I will always try and lead by example when it comes to this. And I think it's about being honest about your mistakes, the mistakes that you've learned from, admitting that failure is inevitable to the people that we're working with, the people that we're coaching, that you fail as part of the process. We don't learn anything if we never, if we never fall down at the first, second, third, fourth hurdle. And I try and model that constantly in being really quite having a sense of humility when you're having those conversations and giving examples from your own learned experience about where you've maybe fallen down. I don't think necessarily being an expert is what we need to be when we're having those conversations. It's coming back to, I think, as I say, asking the right questions and being reflective, I think, is a far more demonstrative way of showing that we are capable of carrying out the role as coaches. I think that can be, Brené Brown writes a great deal, doesn't she, about being vulnerable, and I think that's an incredible place to start, of just saying, actually, have you thought about this? Because I've had to think about this problem before, and it was quite a learning curve as a result. I think that they're really useful conversations to have. I don't think imposter syndrome is a bad thing. I've written about this in my previous book, that actually imposter syndrome keeps you in check, and it's a really empowering thing to constantly have somebody going, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? What if this happens? It's just a risk assessment, I think, having imposter syndrome.
Now, you've talked about training with a consultant coming in, once a couple times a year to work with your coaches, work with your staff. You've talked about the fact that you are leading and helping to guide these coaches. What about the interaction they have with each other? Is there an expectation for, sharing resources, sharing conversations? Hey, I'm doing this project in my group. What are you doing? And what does that look like? And I'll even add, how is Teams helping out with that? Because are you using it for shared resources, shared drives, SharePoint, all that great stuff?
Yeah, so we've got kind of several different outlets as to how that looks for coaches and teachers, really. So we have an action research team, an action research group. They regularly meet and share kind of short think pieces that they read and then come together and discuss, and that's been a really fantastic platform, and that we've carried that on remotely via Teams. They also carry out an action research project, so they come up with an inquiry project every year and then carry that out over the course of the year and share that collaboratively, not just within their own community, but they share that with the whole school body, can access. So last year, earlier this year, during lockdown, they created a series of recordings and shared that with the wider school community, so everybody could access those and just share their kind of own learning curves and pitfalls for their inquiries last year. We also have, I was
say, like, what is that all Teams and Stream based, or what are you using for your backend?
Yeah, so we're literally just using Teams and streaming it. Yeah, so we have a series of kind of videos on. It's an area of our online platform in the SharePoint platform, as I said. So it's an area that they have that they just look after for themselves, so everybody can access that. So like I said, what we've tried to do is pull as much together onto this main platform, because it really adds value. Then, if all of these smaller communities are contributing to it, it really adds value for traffic just coming through. If you want to think about it in a almost as you're building your own website that you want people to engage with. We've also had our subject teams have also had a large proportion of time handed over for to curate their own professional development sessions. So they are able to have like exam boards, bring somebody in and speak to them, or they've delivered sessions on their own, and we've also collated those. So for example, we shared those so that somebody in English might want to go and see a session running in history. And, I don't know, if I'm looking at the Tempest, I would like to know something about post-colonialism. So I can go along to the history session, and that will then inform my own English teaching. And we wanted to open up these opportunities as much as possible, so that there's a real kind of cross collaboration, I think, within schools. I don't necessarily think that it needs to be this big formal collaborative process all the time, that actually these tiny micro communities actually feed into something that means that you've got lots of people sharing in quite a discrete level, I think.
Wow. Talking today to Ms. Kat Howard, the author of Symbiosis, the Curriculum and the Classroom. We're going to make all the Amazon and johncatbookshop.com links available over on our blog post here over on askthetechcoach.com. Kat, as we do step into 2021, I mean, I don't want to bring up the whole let's leave 20. That's kind of cool, but what are your goals? Like, what are your goals as a district? What are your goals as an educator? What are you hoping that 2021 brings you?
I'm really excited. We have an NPQ, which is like a National Professional Development Certificate that teachers can apply for nationally. So I'm really excited to hopefully be part of that on a consultancy basis. So personally, that for me is a very exciting time. As a school, really, I think it's just continuing. We say that we continue to get better. It's part of our school improvement plan. It's almost our mantra every year, and we just do the same, but even better. So we've been doing a great deal of work around curriculum resourcing, creating workbooks for students to access. And I'm really excited about working with our English specialists on that to develop that further. That's going to be really exciting for us.
That's certainly an amazing goal, and I hope that you guys get there. And if you guys have any goals out there, we would love to hear from you guys. You can check out Ask the Tech Coach every single week on Monday mornings. We drop our show, and Sue and I have a great curriculum for you guys with many, many great guests, such as Kat here. And we want to hear from you guys. If you're interested in being on the show, check us out. You can find us on Twitter at Ask the Tech Coach. And don't forget about our free membership site, our TeacherCast Tech Coaches Network. We would love to have you guys. And again, we've got a lot of great stuff happening for you here. So, Kat, one last time, where can we learn about the great things that you are doing, and what's your websites and stuff like that?
So you can find me on Twitter at Sesmith, and I also blog a little bit about all sorts of things, really, wellbeing, leadership, curriculum, at www.sesmith.wordpress.com.
Nice. And we're going to wrap up this episode so I can beg Kat to come on almost every week, because we would love to have her continue to talk about all this great stuff. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. It is just the beginning of 2021. We hope that you had a great holiday, and we hope that you guys join us next week. Don't forget to share Ask the Tech Coach podcast and all the episodes on the TeacherCast Educational with you guys and with your PLN. So on behalf of Kat and Sue and everybody here in the TeacherCast Educational Network, my name is Jeff Bradbury, reminding you guys to keep up the great work in your classrooms and continue sharing your passions with your students.
You've been listening to Ask the Tech Coach, hosted by Jeff Bradbury of the TeacherCast Educational Network. Please reach out to the show with all of your questions on Twitter at Ask the Tech Coach or online at www.askthetechcoach.com. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. And please take a moment to write a review in the App Store.